I'm doing something different in sermon today, so everybody knows. So what I'm doing is basically a modern-day parable. It's a story that is told to you, and in the same way Jesus would tell his disciples stories that they might learn the truth from it. And there's a little bit of silliness in it, and it's all good fun. But the purpose is for us to learn as well. So once upon a time, there was a sheep. And this sheep, he was like all other sheep. He liked to run out in the pasture and play with his friends, and he enjoyed singing, or in his case, bawling. And he was just kind of like your regular sheep. And every night he would sleep peacefully in the barn, and every morning he would be the sheep that was the first one at the gate, ready to just kind of get out and explore the world. And he loved getting out and exploring. He loved the fresh air. He loved the sunshine. He loved to act silly, and he loved to do like all kinds of different sheepy kind of things. All right, and many times when he and his friends were out and they were heading out to find pasture and stuff as the sheepfold, he would desire to wander away from the group, and he would either want to see what was around the next bend, or maybe he would want to stop off to the side of the path and smell some of the roses that were on the side of the path. And there was one day that he actually decided to give this a try. He was walking and he saw the roses, and he decided, you know what, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to smell those roses. And he was on his way to do just that, when all of a sudden he felt like this thump on his side, and he felt something pushing back toward the group. And then he looked behind him, and he saw the shepherd was standing right behind him, and the sheep kind of realized that this shepherd had just pushed him using this long stick that he held in his hand, and he called it his staff. And the sheep had always assumed that this was just kind of his walking stick, but the shepherd had just pushed him with it. And this sheep was not really about to let himself be pushed around. And so he really wanted to get over there. He really wanted to smell those roses. Frankly, he kind of wanted to eat some of them too if he could. And so he decided he was going to make his move a little more forcefully this time. All right, and so he made his move toward the roses, and he felt the push at his side again. This time he ignored it, and he just kind of pushed on through it, and he kept going. And he was about halfway to the roses when all of a sudden he felt something around his neck. And then he got ripped back and just thrown, lifted off of his hooves and thrown back into the fold. And then when he kind of gathered himself and he got back, he looked back at the shepherd, and he realized what had happened. He realized that this mean shepherd had used the other end of his staff with the hook on it to hook this innocent sheep around the neck and lift him off his hooves and throw him back into the sheepfold with all of the other sheep. And he did all this just because this one little sheep wanted to smell the roses. All right, and now this sheep is done. Okay, I mean, he's been pushed around, he's been ripped back by the neck, and I mean, he was going to get to that thicket now. So this time, he was making his move, and he was making it hard, right? So he just took off running, all right? He wasn't going to get hooked around the neck this time. He took off running, and he actually kept his head down so the shepherd couldn't get a hold of him with that hook in that way again. And as he ran by the shepherd, he saw the shepherd drop his staff and throw back his robe. And the sheep was better than halfway to the thicket, when all of a sudden it felt like his head just hit a brick wall, and all he could see was stars as his face went into the dirt. And he was so frightened by what had just happened that he actually just ran back to the sheepfold. Suspicious of the shepherd, he turned around again. And he saw that the shepherd no longer had his staff in his hand, but he was actually holding something in his hand that looked a little more like a baseball bat. And then the sheep remembered that the shepherd, he had seen this thing before. The shepherd called this his rod, or his club. And the shepherd had actually used this before when a wolf had attacked the flock, and that shepherd had nearly taken that wolf's head off with this club before. And the sheep thought about this for a second. He realized, that shepherd just clocked me over the head with his rod, with this club that he carries around. He actually just used the same thing on me that he used to kill a wolf. He used the same thing on me that I'm just an innocent sheep who was trying to smell flowers that he used on the wolf. And the sheep was kind of done for the day. So he spent the rest of the day in the fold, But the sheep, he had a plan. And then the next morning, when the shepherd opened the gate, he was just going to be gone. And he wasn't going to stand for this kind of stuff anymore. This shepherd was clearly a tyrant who didn't care about him at all. So when the shepherd opened the gate the next morning, the sheep, he had his plan all worked out. The shepherd opened the gate the next morning, and this sheep was gone. He was out. And as soon as, he hit that pasture and he could feel like the wind in his wool, and he could feel the fresh grass under his hooves. He was absolutely, completely, and totally free. And he could hear through the sound of the wind. He could just barely make out the shepherd calling his name in the distance, but he didn't even care. He was just completely and totally gone. And you know what the first thing he did was when he was free? He went and smelled those roses. And they were every bit as wonderful as he thought they were going to be. And but he did kind of come across a problem. When he was in there smelling the roses, his wool got caught in all the thorns. And he thought to himself for a moment as he was stuck there in the rose thorns that maybe this was the reason that the shepherd didn't want him going over to the roses. But he kind of quickly pushed that thought aside because he thought, there's no way that this tyrant of a shepherd really cared about me. This wasn't the reason. He was just being mean. That's why he was doing this. And so the sheep, he worked himself free. It took him a couple hours, but he worked himself free. And that was his biggest problem there for a long time. Actually, he ended up spending years away from the fold and away from his own shepherd. And you know what? His life went pretty good. As he was living his life for those years, he enjoyed his life for the most part. He did have a lot of fun. And there was some times that he got himself into some tight spots. There was a couple times that maybe he took like a few wrong turns. But for the most part, life was pretty good. Even though he did end up making some choices that he wasn't particularly proud of as well. But life went pretty good for this sheep, and he went many years without too many issues. But then he started noticing, he started to feel like just slowed down. And he couldn't even really figure out why. He just started to feel just kind of burdened, not quite the same sheep that he used to be. And then one day he woke up and the sun just wasn't as bright anymore. And things just didn't seem as wonderful as they had once seemed. It was like he actually couldn't see. And there was some kind of problem, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what the problem was. But there was some kind of problem that was starting to grow. And he also noticed, now that he thought about it, he had been starting to feel real tired lately. Like he was carrying around some kind of burden or something like that. It's like he was just getting really heavy, and he would get tired really easily. Like he was constantly dragging around some huge burden, and it was just exhausting, and he just couldn't figure out what this was. But there was clearly some kind of issue that he couldn't quite put his finger on. He would get tired after just a few steps. And it got to the point where he couldn't see, and he really couldn't move. And he was actually so afraid of venturing out. He knew that he couldn't see or even hear. The wolf was muffling his hearing. He knew he couldn't see or hear, and he didn't know what would happen to him if a wolf came. And he knew that he might just walk off a cliff one day, and so he wasn't sure of himself. So he actually ended up spending his days that last year just cowering in a cave. He was just so afraid. Couldn't see anything. Couldn't even move. One day, after he'd gone so long without food, he was about ready to die. And he decided that this one day, he wasn't even worried about it anymore. He was just going to go outside the cave, and he was going to smell the flowers for just this one last time. And you know what? He wasn't even afraid of anything anymore. He knew that he was too ugly to eat, and he was too well padded to even harm himself anymore. And so he went outside the cave for this one last time. And when he got out there, he heard this sound. It almost sounded like someone was calling his name, but the sound was too muffled by all the wool that had grown in around his ears, so he couldn't quite make it out. And so he just froze at the mouth of his cave, trying to make out what the sound actually was. And then this moment came where he felt this familiar little thump on his side and this little push that told him where to go. And he realized in that moment that the shepherd had come back. And that was it, because he now felt that same push that bothered him so long ago. And he now felt it at his side, and he was just overjoyed to know that his shepherd had come back for him. Overjoyed to know that this shepherd actually cared about him again, that this shepherd had come, and now the shepherd was guiding him home, and the sheep couldn't help but smile to know that this shepherd was with him and guiding him home. And after the trip that he had been on, after the long time, he thought the shepherd would never want him back again. But actually, this shepherd loved and cared for this sheep so much that when the sheep got tired on this journey, because he couldn't hardly walk, the shepherd actually carried him home. Because that's how much the shepherd loved his sheep. And once he got back, he was amazed to find out just how fast 6 years of mistakes were gone, and just how fast his burden could be lifted. And he was also amazed to find out that he was welcomed back as a beloved member of the family again. The sheep was truly home. And since that day, this sheep, he's kind of looked at the shepherd's staff and rod a little bit differently. I mean, before he used to fear these things, even dislike these things, but now he knows that those things aren't meant to hurt him. Those things are meant to protect him and to guide him and to keep him in the sheepfold. Yes, sometimes they are unpleasant, but the sheep knows now that they are used by a loving shepherd. A shepherd who would never let anyone or anything ever take away his sheep. In fact, a very good shepherd. This story today, you can actually look it up. It's a little bit embellished for you guys. It's actually the story of Shrek the sheep. You could go home and you could look it up. This Shrek the sheep was an actual merino wool sheep that escaped from his shepherd for 6 years. And when they found him, that is actually exactly what he looked like when they found him. He had over 60 pounds of wool on him when they found him. Can you imagine being a sheep and carrying around that kind of burden? But today, I hope to give you a picture of a good shepherd who really cares about his sheep. And the way that good shepherd will also act in your life using his rod and staff. Because there are times that he will use his rod and his staff to keep you in his fold, to keep you as part of his church. He will discipline you in the same way that a loving father would discipline his child. And sometimes it's not pleasant. I mean, I'm sure that there are some of you out there who have been disciplined by God's rod and God's staff. That there are times in our lives that we start to wander, and God reminds us, sometimes gently, sometimes not so gently, to get back to the fold. And for me, it always seems like it was not gently, because I'm a little bit hard-headed. And I'm sure some of you kind of have the same thing going on. But you understand that the reason God does the things that he does, the reason he uses the rod and the staff, is because he loves you, because he cares for you, because he is in fact this good shepherd who wants to take care of you, who wants to watch over you. And then I also want you to know that this rod and this staff, they are there to protect you and guide you. But I also want you to know that even if there comes a time that you do wander completely away, like you make it out of the reach of the staff and the rod, and you are completely gone, even if you were completely away for a long time, like period of years, I want you to know and understand that your shepherd wants nothing more than to find you, call you by name, and carry you home again. Because he cares for you that much. And once he does, you will be surprised to find out just how quickly your burdens can be lifted and just how fast your mistakes can be completely gone. He's a loving shepherd. He cares for you. You are his sheep, and nothing will ever snatch you out of his hands. And now may the peace of God that passes all understanding keep your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And at this time, we'll now worship the Lord with our